So we are in the midst of a real climate emergency. We're also surrounded by climate solutions. That's the paradox of our time. There are so many things we can do to change the world, all of which make a better world and address the climate crisis directly. Everything we know and love is at risk. I mean, those who are being driven out of their homes right now in British Columbia are feeling that in very personal terms. The images that follow are quite alarming. It's understandable if you feel distressed or overwhelmed. This is the global average temperature change since 1880. And that shows when the COP treaties have been held and how they make absolutely no difference to the process. So what's causing this sudden rise in Earth's temperature? And fundamentally, it's carbon dioxide and the other main greenhouse gases, methane and nitrous oxide and the F gases. So there's carbon dioxide traps heat. So here we have Earth's atmosphere. Greenhouse gases trap heat, and we need them. They protect us from boiling in the daytime and freezing at night. They're essential and they're a natural part of the whole atmosphere. But one of these greenhouse gases is carbon dioxide, CO2. And whenever we burn fossil fuels, they release their ancient carbon into the atmosphere. The carbon mixed with its oxygen forms CO2. So the CO2 is released whenever we burn fossil fuels in our vehicles, whenever we have factories or power plants that burn coal, oil or gas, whenever we clear cut our forests and release carbon from the trees and from the soil, whenever we heat our homes with oil or gas, whenever we eat beef or dairy and raise beef or dairy, they're producing methane, which traps 84 times more heat over a 20-year period than CO2. And so cumulatively, these gases trap heat, making the weather warmer, wetter, and more unstable. The warmer it is, the more water is evaporated from the ocean, and the more rain comes down. Madagascar's climate-induced famine right now is forcing people to eat locusts and cactus leaves to survive. They say it's the worst drought they've had in 40 years. In northern Kenya, the rains have been failing, and drought is threatening 2 million people with famine, and their animals are dying. And they say, if the animals die, we all die. This is a direct impact of the climate crisis now. Here in Canada, we had an all-time heat record in Lytton this summer, 46.6 degrees before. That was the record at the time, and then it got hotter 3 days later, and the fire took the town and the entire town was destroyed, up to 49.5 degrees. In the heat dome at that same period of summer, at least 595 people died in British Columbia from heat exhaustion. And the scientists say that the climate change made extreme heat event 150 times more likely than if we'd not had the greenhouse gas loading of the atmosphere. The heat dome locally where I live on southern Vancouver Island killed 1 billion marine creatures because we had very low tides and they all got cooked to death in the low tides. And then we had the forest fires, which come every summer and seem to get worse. Well, in fact, they are getting worse. They're burning 10 times more than they did in the 1990s. And we're just at the beginning of the climate crisis. And then in June, Germany had deadly floods that the scientists say were 9 times more likely because of the climate crisis. And now we ourselves have, this is flooding on the Malahat this Monday. This is the Coquihalla Highway, completely broken and washed away. This is the fire in Abbotsford that's happening today, probably still burning as I give this presentation. The carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere is close to the level it was 15 million years ago. And the last time it was at a similar level, temperatures were 3 to 4 degrees hotter, and the sea level was 20 meters higher. This is Vancouver with a 5-meter sea level rise. The sea level is expected to rise by 2.3 meters for each degree increase. So this will be the reality sometime in the future if we don't stop our climate pollution now. The biggest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it, that we feel powerless. So here's how we can kick the carbon: more cycling, more public transit, more easily walkable cities, more electric vehicles of every kind, more homes with heat pumps, not oil or gas, closing down all fossil fuel expansion projects, a just transition for all fossil fuel workers, more use of green hydrogen in industry, more people eating much less meat, more people embracing zero waste, more widespread tree planting, more protection of forests, more climate activism, and more organic farming. This is British Columbia's emissions from the year 2000, and our population has risen during that time, but overall there's been no progress whatsoever in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And that's what we need to achieve, a 60% reduction by 2030. Some say 100%, but it's 7% a year. That's what the change we need to embrace. By way of progress, Denmark has passed a binding law for the whole country to reduce its climate pollution by 70% by 2030. So there's provincial and federal government leadership that's needed. There's leadership at the NIMO and regional district level, and there's you and me, community level leadership. Tonight, we're just talking about this level. The other levels are equally important, and many of us are active on that level too, but this is the piece that doesn't get the attention. So we can't solve the whole problem, but at least we can take a bite out of it. So let's get to it. Our electricity in British Columbia is in effect 100% renewable. And so it's not something we need to be concerned with. That's one thing in our favor. What we need is changes at 5 levels. We need to change our transportation, our homes, our food, our stuff, and our money. For transportation, cycling produces 0 emissions, walking produces 0 emissions, and a bus with 10 passengers has much less CO2. But when it's electric bus, it's 0 emissions. That's the Victoria to Tofino electric bus, already using electric drive every day between Victoria and Tofino, has been on the road for about 6 months now. Electric bikes they remove hills. Anyone who's been, you can sail up the hill without any break in a sweat at all. And there's more information on all this stuff on our website at communityclimateconnectors.ca. This bike lane fights climate change. It's a very real and true statement. That's from Copenhagen. In Copenhagen, 48% of all trips to work and school are by bicycle. And I just learned recently that in Delft in Holland, 70% of all trips of every kind are by bicycle or walking or bus. So this is how our travel impacts it. So domestic flights are, as much as 121 grams per, I'm not sure what it is there, per kilometer traveled. Through the long haul flights, car with 1 passenger, bus, car with 4 passengers, bicycle with 0. So our travel has a big impact. When we're driving, every car that's burning gasoline or diesel is releasing CO2 into the atmosphere. It is adding fire to the climate emergency. Every electric car, by contrast, is not. And so if you wonder about buying an electric vehicle, we have a lot of information on our website at Community Climate Connectors. And all of these vehicles are battery charged, ranging in price from $38,000 for the Chevy Bolt up to getting to the more expensive end, up $85,000. They all have a range of around 400 kilometers now. And I've been driving an electric car for 2 or 3 years now and totally love it. Electric pickup trucks are coming soon. And by evidence of progress in Norway, by January of next year, 100% of all new cars sold will be electric or plug-in hybrids. There will be no more conventional vehicles being sold at all in Norway. So if you're thinking about getting an electric car, you can get a rebate of up to $8,000. Your range is over 400 kilometers plus. Your cost of operating is $1 for every 1,000 kilometers. Is that right? Yeah. Or was it $10? $10 for 1,000 kilometers. I think I got that wrong. You're saving on up to $2,000 a year in fuel. And the electricity is 100% renewable. And there's electric trucks coming soon. There's electric ferries coming soon. And there's even small, very small scale electric airplanes flying around. When we turn to our homes, every home that burns oil or gas is doing the same. It's putting out carbon emissions that are contributing to the climate crisis. When you shift to an electric heat pump, you cease doing that. And so that's a ductless heat pump, which is around $5,000, towards which you get considerable amount of grants. A larger heat pump would be a whole house system, which is up to $12,000, $13,000 investment. There are considerable grants available for these at betterhomesbc.ca, and also grants for renovating a home, for making your home more efficient, windows, all that sort of stuff. And by way of grants and rebates, you can get a $200 grant towards an inner guide home renovation, up to $5,000 for insulation, up to $3,000 for a heat pump. You can get a zero interest loan for up to $40,000 and various other loans that are available. Essentially, if you have central heating by natural gas, oil, or propane, you can get up to $11,000 in grants and assistance for going electric and switching to a heat pump. And the regional district on Nanaimo has these additional grants, and an additional $350 for a heat pump, et cetera, an overall home improvement up to $2,000. And low-income households can get a free energy saving kit and energy conservation assistance. And if you get a group of people together in the regional district in Nanaimo, if there's two to four of you, you get an extra $200 off your heat pump. If there's 15 to 20 of you, and $425 off your heat pump. So it's worth talking to friends and neighbors to do this thing together. A passive house design has minimal need for any heating or cooling at all. That's the joy of that design. That's a house in North Park, Victoria. This is in Nanaimo. And by evidence of progress in Brussels, ever since 2016, every new building, large or small, has used passive house design and simply ceased producing any greenhouse gases. If you're a tenant or in a condo, it's a bit more complicated. Our advice is to find 2 or 3 other tenants or condo owners who also want to take climate action, research the available grants for multi-unit residential buildings, write to your landlord or strata council, and we have a letter ready on the website for that, and then write to your mayor and MLA to seek their support if there's more needed. Let me turn to our food. Diet high in meat has got high greenhouse gases. Low in meat, high in vegetables is low greenhouse gases. There's a big difference. And primarily, a lot of it is down to the cattle. Globally, transport produces 15% of the climate crisis, livestock almost 16%. So that's the big factor. It really is quite a big factor here. Yes, it's about you, Bessie. And so this is an impact chart that shows, the green is looking good. Then you get into poultry, pork, and dairy, and then beef and lamb and goat, which are very heavy on the greenhouse impact. On top of which, we need to understand that 95% of our food arrives on the ferry, and California is having its worst drought in 12,000 years. And I can add in right now that with all the main roads from Vancouver to the rest of Canada severed by the landslides, the only food coming into Vancouver Island will be coming through America. There'll be no other food, nothing else will be arriving in stores in Vancouver for quite a while until they fix those roads. So there's going to be some supermarket shelf emptying crisis happening. So it's also about regenerative local organic farming, because organic farming stores carbon in the soil and produces food locally and is generally better all around. And then if you're moving off a meat diet towards a vegetarian diet, it's really good to get a good cookbook. My wife, Karen Herriot, wrote the 0 Mile Diet Cookbook, and we turned vegan 2 years ago, and we used the Vegan for Everybody cookbook to learn more about what the good recipes are. It's hard to invent a good vegan recipe. When you see what people are doing with their sauces and their tastes and their herbs and their spices, it changes everything. So now we turn to the stuff we consume, an awful lot of which is imported. And so we've got to bear in mind that if the countries that are importing it are burning coal to generate electricity to run the machinery, and it's coming on these great big container ships burning diesel and being trucked to our homes in trucks burning diesel, that Amazon box has got a heavy carbon footprint. So we do need to consciously think about the sheer volume of stuff that we consume. And then to ask the question, can we go to zero waste? Because when waste with organic materials in a landfill composts or breaks down, it produces methane, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas. And finally, we come to our money. And this is important because these 5 banks, RBC, TD, Scotia, BMO, and CIBC, are still investing in fossil fuels. So since the Paris Agreement to try and tackle the climate crisis was signed, they've invested $726 billion in climate danger, whereas local credit unions don't do that at all. And if you have an investment portfolio and you choose a responsible investment advisor, you can find a way to divest your investments of all fossil fuel connections. And that website, RIA Canada, will give you a link to local investment advisors. So the message is we can change the world. And the question is also for some of us, could your family become 100% climate and nature friendly by 2025? So we put together a chart, this is just the top of it, that shows all the different steps you can take. And you can say, well, we can't do it this year, but yeah, within 2 years, we could look to buying an electric car or getting a heat pump or growing our own food in the garden. It doesn't have to be all done at once, take time over it. Ideally, by 2030, all of us are doing all of this. So this is the end of our presentation here. If you're living in Nanaimo, you can find more activities with the groups that are members of the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub at that website. And throughout British Columbia, we have 200 member organizations in the West Coast Climate Action Network. So you can link to them through our website and get engaged with a local group. And so I'm going to say that's the end, and I'm going to stop recording.